Nashville, Tennessee, April 1829. The newly elected governor of the state of Tennessee is in a room at the Nashville Inn, writing letters. He is 36 years old. He has been governor for 11 weeks. He is the rising star of American politics, Andrew Jackson's chosen protégé, the man everyone in Washington and Nashville believes will one day be president. He has been married for 11 weeks. The letters he is writing are resignations. By the time the sun rises, he will have walked out of the governor's mansion, walked out of his marriage, and disappeared from American public life so completely that newspapers across the country will publish his obituary 3 months later, while he is still alive. He will not return for 6 years. And when he does, he will save Texas. This is the story of how Sam Houston became Sam Houston. Welcome back to the Western Ledger. I'm Lamar. Last time we watched a small army of Texan volunteers shouting, "Remember the Alamo," run across an open prairie at San Jacinto and capture the most powerful general in Mexico. The man who led them was, in the spring of 1836, the most improbable choice for that role anyone could have made. To understand why, you have to go back 7 years, to a hotel room in Tennessee, to a marriage no one will explain. This is Sam Houston before he was Sam Houston. Sam Houston was born in Virginia in 1793, the fifth of 9 children in a Scots-Irish family of modest means. His father, a major in the Continental Army, died when Sam was 13, leaving the family in financial difficulty. His mother moved the family to Tennessee. Sam, 14 years old and with no interest in farming or formal schooling, ran away. He didn't go far. He went across the Tennessee River and into the lands of the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee chief, Ulutica, a man who would shape the rest of Houston's life, took the runaway white boy in. He gave him a new name, Colonne, the Raven. For 3 years, Houston lived with the Cherokee. He learned the language. He hunted, fished, traded. He came to believe, in a way few white Americans of his generation ever did, that the Cherokee were not savages to be subdued, but people whose civilization happened to be different from his own. He came back to white society at 18, ran a one-room schoolhouse for 1 year, and then in 1813 enlisted as a private in the United States Army. Within a year, he was a 3rd lieutenant, and within another year, he was at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend in Alabama, fighting against the Creek Nation under the command of a militia general named Andrew Jackson. He was 21 years old. He took a barbed Creek arrow through his thigh, refused to be carried off the field, pulled the arrow out himself, and led an assault on the Creek breastworks, where he was shot twice more, once in the shoulder, once in the arm. The shoulder wound would never fully close. It would drain pus and blood for the rest of his life. Andrew Jackson saw all of it. He saw Houston refuse evacuation. He saw the assault. And from that day forward, Houston was Jackson's man. The rest came fast. Jackson sent him on diplomatic missions to the Cherokee. Houston was almost the only white American Jackson trusted to negotiate with them honestly. Houston was elected to Congress from Tennessee in 1823, served 2 terms, and in 1827, at 34 years old, was elected governor of Tennessee. When Jackson became president in 1829, Houston was the heir apparent, the next Jackson. the man being measured for the White House. And then he got married. Her name was Eliza Allen. She was 19 years old, the daughter of one of Tennessee's wealthiest planters. Houston had courted her on and off for years. They were married on January 22, 1829, in the parlor of her father's home. 11 weeks later, she was back in her father's parlor, and Sam Houston was finished as a public man. What happened between them on that marriage has been the subject of 2 centuries of speculation. Eliza never spoke about it publicly. Houston, when pressed, said this and only this: "She was cold to me, and I was a fool not to leave her at the altar." That was all anyone ever got. Theories filled the gap. Some said Eliza had been forced into the marriage by her family and loved someone else. Some said Houston's wounds, the shoulder that still drained, the festering thigh, had repulsed her. Some said the marriage had simply been a mistake of the kind that men in 1829 could not undo without destroying themselves. Whatever it was, Houston destroyed himself. He resigned the governorship of Tennessee. He boarded a steamboat at Nashville and rowed it down the Cumberland to the Mississippi, and from there up the Arkansas River into Indian Territory, what is today eastern Oklahoma. He went back to the only people he had ever fully trusted. Ulutica, now an old man, ill, his Cherokee nation displaced by the United States government and resettled in Arkansas, adopted him, formally, as his son. In Cherokee custom, the adoption was complete and binding. Sam Houston, former governor of Tennessee, became Colone again. The Raven, a Cherokee citizen. He took a Cherokee wife, Tiana Rogers Gentry, herself part Cherokee, part white, a widow with her own land and her own standing. They lived together for 3 years on a small farm where Houston ran a trading post that mostly sold whiskey. He drank most of what he sold. The Cherokee gave him a new name in this period. They called him Utsiti Arditaski, the Big Drunk. It was not affectionate. It was descriptive. By 1832, Houston was 39 years old. His political career was over. His public reputation was a wreckage. He had been written off by every newspaper that had once measured him for the presidency. And then, in the late summer of 1832, a letter arrived for him from Washington. It was from the president. Andrew Jackson wanted Houston to go to Texas. The official purpose was to negotiate with the Comanche on behalf of the United States government. The unofficial purpose, the one the 2 men understood and no one else needed to, was simpler than that. Jackson wanted to buy Texas, and he wanted his oldest friend on the ground. Houston crossed the Red River into Texas in early December of 1832. He arrived in Nacogdoches in the dead of winter, riding a thin Cherokee pony, wearing a long Mexican-style serape against the cold. He was carrying a passport from the Mexican government that identified him as a Cherokee diplomat, technically accurate, practically useful. The Mexicans wanted Comanche peace. Houston had spent his adult life learning how to talk to indigenous peoples on their own terms. He never made it to the Comanche. By the time he reached Nacogdoches, the political situation in Texas was already shifting under his feet. Stephen F. Austin had returned from his first round of negotiations with the Mexican government. The Convention of 1833 was being organized. Houston, newly arrived but immediately recognizable as a man with national-level political experience, was elected as a delegate. He sat in the convention at San Felipe in April of 1833. He chaired the committee that drafted a proposed state constitution for Texas. He was not yet a Texan in the sense of having lived there, but he was already shaping what a Texas might be. What happened next took 3 years. Houston worked his land claims, practiced a little law in Nacogdoches, made the connections that would matter. He watched Austin go to Mexico City and disappear into a prison cell. He watched the law of April 6th strangle American immigration. He watched Santa Anna dissolve the Mexican Congress and crush Zacatecas. He saw the war coming, and he positioned himself. When the Texas Revolution began at Gonzales in October 1835, Houston was named Major General of the regular Texan Army, a force that did not yet exist outside of paper. On March 2nd, 1836, at Washington on the Brazos, he signed the Texas Declaration of Independence. 4 days later, on March 6th, Travis and Bowie and Crockett died at the Alamo. When the news reached Houston, he was at Gonzales, the same Gonzales whose cannon had started the war. His army, when he counted heads, was about 374 men. Most of them were undisciplined volunteers. Most of them had brought their own rifles and almost nothing else. He did not march on San Antonio. He retreated. He pulled his small army back east, away from Santa Anna's main force, abandoning settlements as he went. Civilians fled with him, what would come to be called the runaway scrape, a panicked flight of women and children and old men toward the Sabine River and the United States border. Houston's officers thought he was a coward. The provisional government of Texas thought he was a coward. Stephen Austin, recently returned to Texas, questioned him publicly. The decision haunts Houston's reputation in popular memory to this day. It also may have saved Texas. What Houston was doing, what only he understood at the time, was buying time. Time for Santa Anna to overextend his supply lines. Time for the panicked civilian retreat to clear his lines of operation. Time for his volunteers to become something resembling an army. 6 weeks. That is what he was buying. 6 weeks until he found the ground he was looking for. For 6 weeks, Houston ran. He retreated east across the Brazos, then across the San Bernard, then back toward the swampy ground where Buffalo Bayou meets the San Jacinto River. He kept moving. He gave his officers no plan. He gave his men no explanation. He drilled them as he marched. By mid-April, his army had grown to nearly 900 men, drawn by the same disasters that should have ended the revolution. The Alamo. Goliad, where Santa Anna had ordered the execution of 342 Texan prisoners after they had surrendered. The atrocities had brought volunteers, angry ones, into Houston's ranks faster than they had brought Mexican soldiers into Santa Anna's. Santa Anna himself was now closing on Houston with about 700 of his best troops. He had divided his army into 3 columns, pursuing the Texan government, and he was the lead column. On April 20th, the 2 armies met on opposite sides of a wide grass plain that opened onto the San Jacinto River. That afternoon there was a skirmish, Inconclusive. Houston pulled his men back into a small oak grove against the river. Santa Anna camped on the other end of the plain, beside a marsh, with the river at his back. A defensible position, but also, and this matters, a trap. On the afternoon of April 21st, in the heat of a Texas spring day, with most of his exhausted men taking their afternoon meal, Santa Anna's army was caught entirely unprepared. Houston's men crossed the plain in silence, 3 columns. The Texan band, marching beside the twin sisters' cannons, played a single song over and over as they advanced, a popular love ballad called "Will You Come to the Bower?" They reached the Mexican camp before the alarm was raised. What followed was 18 minutes of combat. The Mexican army was overwhelmed. 630 Mexican soldiers were killed. 208 were wounded. 730 were taken prisoner. 9 Texans died. Houston himself, riding at the head of his men, took a musket ball through the ankle. He had 2 horses shot out from under him. He stayed on the field until the fighting was over. Santa Anna escaped the battle. He was captured the next morning in a chaparral thicket, dressed in the linen shirt and overalls of a Mexican private, betrayed by his own captured soldiers who saluted him as His Excellency. They brought him to Houston, who was lying under an oak tree with his shattered ankle elevated, conscious but in tremendous pain. The President of Mexico stood before the wounded former governor of Tennessee. Houston, from under the tree, dictated the surrender. In 18 minutes on a flat Texas plain, Sam Houston had won independence for the largest territory ever taken from one nation by another in a single battle of the 19th century. The drunk who had walked out of Tennessee 7 years earlier, the obituary subject, was now the most famous American west of the Mississippi. He would be elected the first president of the Republic of Texas the following autumn. But the nation he had created had no money. It had no recognized borders. It had a Comanche frontier on 3 sides. It had no idea how to be a country. Next time, the Republic of Texas, the nation that almost wasn't. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.